I'm telling this because it still affects how I travel, how I choose routes, and how I react to silence. I'm not claiming anything paranormal happened. There were no monsters, no ghosts, no impossible events. What happened was human, and that's what makes it worse. The only reason this feels unreal is because no one expects it to happen to them. This occurred in the outskirts area around 150 miles before Nashville. I won't name the exact location, not because it's mysterious, but because people still live there, and some of them might recognize details. I don't want attention. I want this recorded accurately. At the time, I was working seasonal contract jobs that required driving long distances. I was used to isolation. I liked it actually. Long roads, no traffic, no distractions. That day, I was traveling alone, mid-afternoon, clear weather, nothing unusual. I had enough fuel, water, and food for the drive. The main highway was undergoing construction, so I followed a marked detour. It was officially listed, not some shortcut I found online. The detour took me off the highway and onto a two-lane road that stretched out into open land. The road quality dropped quickly, but the signage indicated it was still a public route. Traffic thinned out within minutes. Eventually, I didn't see another vehicle for nearly an hour. That wasn't alarming at first. Rural roads are like that. What stood out was how long it stayed that way. The land around me was flat and dry, with scattered trees and abandoned fencing. Some areas looked used for livestock at one point, but not recently. Gates were open, hinges rusted. Old structures sat far back from the road, collapsing slowly, untouched. About an hour into the detour, I noticed something odd. There were no mile markers anymore. No road maintenance signs. No warning signs. Just pavement and land. My phone still showed signal, but navigation apps struggled to load map data. I told myself it was nothing. Then I noticed how tired I felt. Not sleepy, heavy, like my body was reacting to stress before my mind caught up. I realized I hadn't seen a crossroad, driveway, or intersecting path in a long time. The road was straight, but not new. It had been there for decades. Eventually, I saw a cluster of buildings in the distance. Relief washed over me. I assumed it was a small town or at least a rest stop. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't either. There were buildings, yes, but no businesses. No gas station. No visible signs of life. Just structures, houses, sheds, a long building that looked like a warehouse or former school. Everything was standing, but nothing looked maintained. I slowed down. There was a sign at the edge of the road, faded and sun-bleached. I couldn't read the name clearly. The lettering was there, but worn enough to be illegible. Under it, someone had spray painted over part of the sign, not vandalizing it, but obscuring it. That should have been my cue to keep driving. Instead, I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe relief at seeing something after so long. Maybe instinct telling me to assess the area before continuing. I parked on the side of the road and stepped out. The silence was immediate and complete. No engines. No wind through trees. No insects. It felt like sound itself had been absorbed. The buildings weren't abandoned in the usual way. Windows were intact. Doors were closed. Curtains hung inside some houses. There were cars parked near a few buildings. Older models, dusty but not wrecked. This wasn't a ghost town. This was a place people had left in a hurry or been slowly drained from. I walked a short distance down the road, staying close to my car. I called out, expecting someone to answer. Even a dog barking would have been reassuring. Nothing responded. I noticed something else then. Every window I could see was covered from the inside. Not boarded up. Covered. Blankets, sheets, cardboard. Whatever people had on hand. That's when I felt watched. Not in a dramatic way. No sudden fear spike. Just awareness. The kind you get when you know someone is observing you, but you don't know from where. I got back in my car. As I did, I saw movement. A person stepped out from between two buildings farther down the road. Then another. Then more. They didn't approach. They just stood there, watching. They were ordinary people. Men and women. Different ages. No weapons visible. No aggressive posture. But none of them waved. None of them spoke. I started my engine. One of them raised a hand. Not to greet me, but to signal something to the others. A few more people appeared from behind buildings, filling in gaps along the road. I realized then that they weren't surprised to see me. They were waiting to see what I would do. I drove forward slowly, passing them. No one stepped into the road. No one tried to stop me. They just watched my car move through their town. I didn't make eye contact. Once I cleared the last building, I accelerated. The road continued. No signs. No indication I'd passed through anything at all. I drove for another 40 minutes before reaching an actual town. Gas station, traffic lights, people. Normality hit me so hard it made my hands shake. I pulled into a gas station and sat in my car for several minutes before going inside. When I paid for fuel, I asked the clerk about the settlement I'd passed. He asked me to repeat myself. I described it. The buildings, the location, the road. His expression changed, not to confusion, to discomfort. He told me there was nothing out there. I insisted. I'd just driven through it. He said the detour passed through empty land only. No towns, no communities. Another customer overheard and joined the conversation. Older guy, local. He told me quietly that people don't stop out there, that if I saw something, I should forget it. I asked why. He said some places don't want attention. Some communities cut themselves off intentionally. Not officially, not legally, just socially. They don't register. They don't advertise. They don't want outsiders. I asked why people would do that. He didn't answer. I left after that. Weeks passed, but I couldn't shake the memory. I looked up satellite images, old maps, county records. There was nothing listed where I'd been. No town name, no zoning information. Then I found something. A decades-old document referencing an unincorporated settlement that had opted out of services. No utilities, no law enforcement presence, no emergency response. The reason given was internal governance. That phrase stuck with me. Months later, curiosity got the better of me. I took a different route near the same area, not the same road, just nearby. I never found the place again. What I did find were more faded signs, more obscured names, more roads that led nowhere. I've since learned that there are communities in the US that exist in legal gray zones. Groups that isolate for ideological, economic, or cultural reasons. Places where outsiders are not welcome, but not stopped, just remembered. What frightens me isn't that I found such a place. It's that they noticed me immediately, and that they knew I didn't belong there before I did. I'm sharing this because it changed how I think about remote places in the United States. Not because something impossible happened, but because nothing stopped it from happening. There were no laws broken, no dramatic crimes committed, nothing that would make the news. And that's exactly why it stayed with me. This happened a few years ago when I was traveling alone for personal reasons. I had time off work and wanted to clear my head. I chose to drive through a large national forest. I won't name the forest, but it spans hundreds of miles, has limited ranger presence, and many unmaintained roads that are still technically public. I wasn't inexperienced. I had camped alone before, hiked solo, driven long distances. I had supplies, a working vehicle, and informed people roughly where I was going. What I didn't account for was how quickly isolation becomes vulnerability when something minor goes wrong. The day started normally. I left a small town early in the morning, filled my gas tank, bought water and food, and followed posted signs into the forest. The main road was paved at first, then gradually turned into gravel. That was expected. The weather was clear, no storms forecasted. Traffic dropped off steadily. Within an hour, I hadn't seen another car. That didn't bother me. What did bother me was how many side roads branched off without any markings. No signs saying where they led, no barriers, no warnings. Just narrow dirt roads disappearing into dense trees. Some looked recently used. Others were overgrown. I stuck to the main gravel road. After another 40 minutes, I came across a designated pull-off area with a sign indicating dispersed camping was allowed. No facilities, no ranger station, just open land. I decided to stop there for a short break, stretch my legs, and eat something. When I got out of the car, I noticed how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, functional quiet, like an area that expected you to handle your own problems. I stayed near my vehicle, ate, and checked my phone. I had limited signal, enough to send a text, not enough to load maps properly. I sent a quick message to a friend saying where I roughly was. Then I got back in and continued driving. About 20 minutes later, I felt the steering pull slightly. I pulled over immediately and checked the tire. It wasn't flat, but it was losing pressure. A slow leak. Probably a nail or sharp rock. I had a spare and tools. I'd changed tires before. It wasn't ideal, but it wasn't an emergency either. I decided to replace it there instead of risking further damage. That decision mattered. While I was working, I heard an engine. I looked up, expecting a ranger or another traveler. Instead, An older pickup truck slowed as it passed. Two men inside. They looked at me, not casually, not briefly. They watched until I was fully in view. The truck kept going. I finished changing the tire and packed everything up. I told myself I was being paranoid. People notice things in quiet places. That's normal. I got back in the car and continued down the road. 10 minutes later, I saw the same truck pulled off ahead. The hood was up. One of the men stood near the front. The other leaned against the side, smoking. I slowed instinctively. This wasn't unusual either. Vehicles break down. People stop to help each other in remote areas. But something felt off. They didn't wave. They didn't signal for help. They just watched my car approach. I drove past without stopping. In my rearview mirror, I saw the hood come down. The truck pulled back onto the road. They followed me. Not closely, not aggressively, just present. I told myself it was coincidence. There weren't many roads out there. After about 15 minutes, I turned onto another gravel road clearly marked on a sign as leading toward an exit point. The truck followed. At that point, my chest tightened. Still no proof of anything, but the pattern was there. I increased speed slightly. They matched it. I slowed. They slowed. I didn't want to escalate anything. I didn't want to accuse. I just wanted distance. The road narrowed. Trees grew closer. Visibility dropped. Then I made a mistake. I turned onto a smaller side road, thinking I could lose them. The road was rougher than I expected. Deep ruts. Loose gravel. After about a mile, my car bottomed out on a rock. I heard the sound immediately. Metal scraping. The car stalled. I tried restarting it. It turned over, but wouldn't stay running. I checked my phone. No signal. I sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, listening. Then I heard the truck. It stopped behind me. Both men got out. They approached slowly, not rushed, not aggressive. One of them asked if I needed help. I said my car stalled. They offered to take a look. I didn't get out of the vehicle. I cracked the window slightly and said I'd already called for assistance, which wasn't true. They exchanged a look. One of them smiled and said there wasn't any cell service out there. He was right. They asked where I was headed. I gave a vague answer. They asked where I came from. I gave another vague answer. The questions weren't friendly. They were assessing. One of them glanced toward the trees, then back at me. I realized then how far I was from help. No cameras. No witnesses. No one expecting me at a specific time. They could do almost anything, and it would take days for someone to even notice I was missing. That realization was physical. My hands started shaking. I said I was going to stay with the car and wait for a ranger. The man closest to my window said rangers didn't come out that way often. He wasn't threatening me. He didn't need to. After a long pause, the other man said they had a tow chain and could pull me back to the main road. I told them no. Another pause. Then, without arguing, they stepped back. They returned to their truck. They didn't leave immediately. They sat there with the engine running for several minutes. I didn't move. Finally, they drove away. I waited another 10 minutes before getting out. I checked under the hood and under the car. The damage was worse than I thought, but not catastrophic. After some adjustments and waiting, I managed to get the car running well enough to limp back toward the main road. I drove slowly. My eyes stayed on the mirrors the entire time. When I reached the paved highway hours later, I pulled over and cried. I didn't report anything. What would I report? Two men asked if I needed help. That's all it was on paper. But here's what stayed with me. They knew the area. They knew the service gaps. They knew how long I'd be alone. They knew there was no immediate risk to them. Remote places don't create danger. They remove protection. And sometimes, that's all it takes. I'm telling this the way I remember it, without exaggeration. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I just want it documented somewhere, because the people I've told in real life either change the subject or look at me like I'm quietly unstable. Maybe writing it down or saying it out loud will make it make sense. Or maybe it won't. Either way, this is what happened. This took place in the United States, in a remote stretch of land most people only see from the air. I was traveling alone for work, driving between two small towns that barely qualify as towns. One gas station, one diner, a handful of houses, and miles of nothing between them. I'd done that drive before, but this time I decided to take a secondary route. The GPS suggested it as a shortcut. It saved distance, but not time. The road turned from asphalt to cracked pavement, then to gravel, then to dirt. I kept going because the GPS kept insisting I was still on track. No warning. No road not suitable message. Just calm, confident instructions. The sun was already low, and I didn't want to backtrack. That was my first mistake. There were no other cars, no power lines, no signs, just land that looked untouched, like it had been left alone on purpose. The farther I drove, the more aware I became of how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind where you start noticing the sound of your own breathing inside the car. I passed an old fence line at one point, rusted wire, leaning posts, but it didn't enclose anything. It just stopped, like someone gave up halfway through building it. A few minutes later, the GPS screen froze. The arrow stopped moving, even though I was still driving. Then it rerouted itself without explanation. Continue straight, it said. There was no straight road, just a fork, left or right. I chose left. The road narrowed even more. Trees started appearing, sparse at first, then thicker. Not forest, just enough to block the view of what lay beyond them. I remember thinking that if my car broke down out there, no one would find me for days. That thought sat heavy in my chest. About 10 minutes later, I saw something ahead that didn't belong. A building, not a house, not a barn, something industrial. Low, rectangular, made of concrete or stone, its color almost matching the dirt around it. No lights, no driveway, no visible purpose. It sat just off the road, partially obscured by trees. I slowed down without realizing it. The building looked old, but not abandoned. No broken windows, no graffiti, no signs of collapse. Just waiting. I told myself it was probably some kind of utility structure. Maybe a water facility or a government building left over from decades ago. Still, there was a feeling I couldn't explain, like I'd interrupted something by noticing it. I didn't plan to stop, but then my low fuel warning came on. I checked my gauge. I had enough to turn around, but I wasn't confident I could retrace my route without getting lost. The GPS was still frozen. No signal on my phone. I pulled over near the building, thinking I'd just step out, stretch, and decide what to do. The moment I opened my car door, the silence hit harder. Outside, it felt thicker. The air was cool and dry, but it smelled off. Not bad, just unfamiliar, like a place you're not supposed to breathe for too long. I walked closer to the building. There was a door on the side facing the road. Metal, slightly scratched, unlocked. That's when I noticed something that still bothers me. There were footprints in the dirt. Not fresh, not old, just present, leading to the door. None leading away. I called out, asking if anyone was there. My voice sounded wrong out there. Too loud, like I'd broken a rule. No answer. I didn't want to go inside. I swear that wasn't my intention, but standing there felt worse than stepping in. Like being halfway between decisions was more dangerous than choosing one. I pushed the door open. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately. The light from outside barely reached more than a few feet in. The room was narrow, with bare walls and a concrete floor. No furniture, no equipment, no dust. That's what struck me first, how clean it was. There was another door at the far end. Before I could move toward it, I heard something behind me. Not footsteps. Breathing. Slow. Deliberate. Close. I turned around, expecting to see someone standing in the doorway. There was no one. The door behind me was still open. Daylight poured in. The breathing continued. I spoke without thinking. Asked who was there. The breathing stopped. Then a voice came from somewhere deeper in the building. Not loud. Not threatening. You're not supposed to be here this late. I asked who they were. There was a pause. Not hesitation, consideration. Someone who's been here longer than you. That answer made my skin prickle. I don't know why. It just felt wrong. I apologized. Said I was lost. Said I was leaving. Another pause. You should, the voice said. Before it gets dark all the way. I backed out without turning my back on the interior. Once I was outside, I shut the door hard and walked quickly to my car. I didn't look back at the building. I started the engine and drove. The road looked different. I know that sounds vague, but that's the best way I can describe it. The curves were sharper, the trees closer. Landmarks I'd passed earlier were gone. The sky darkened faster than it should have. Then my headlights flickered. The radio turned on by itself. Static at first, then a voice. Not the same one, but similar. Same tone, same calm. You took the wrong way again. I yelled at the radio to shut up. It did. A mile later, I saw another building. Same shape, same size, same placement off the road. I didn't stop this time. I kept driving, heart pounding, telling myself it was coincidence. That remote places reused designs. That my fear was making things seem connected. Then I saw the same fence line again. The rusted wire. The half-built enclosure. I slammed the brakes. I was looping. Panic set in fully then. Not fear, panic. The kind that makes your thoughts slippery. I tried turning around. The road behind me looked unfamiliar too. My fuel needle dropped suddenly, faster than it should have. That's when I noticed headlights behind me. A vehicle followed at a steady distance. No high beams. No attempt to pass. I slowed. It slowed. I sped up. It kept pace. Relief mixed with dread. At least it was someone. At least I wasn't alone anymore. I pulled over and stepped out, waving. The vehicle stopped. Its headlights stayed on, but the engine sound faded. I approached slowly. There was no driver. No interior light. No movement. Then the headlights shut off. The vehicle was gone. I stumbled back to my car, shaking, locked the doors, started driving again without any sense of direction. The radio turned on one last time. You'll wear yourself out like this. I begged, actually begged, for directions. The voice answered immediately. Stop looking for roads. Look for exits. I don't remember driving after that. I remember stopping at a place with lights. A small roadside store. I remember people. Normal people. I remember sitting on the floor inside, unable to explain why I was crying. My car was parked outside. My fuel tank was empty. When I asked where I was, the clerk named a town that shouldn't have been reachable from where I'd been. Not with the fuel I had. Not with the roads I took. I waited until morning to leave. Before I did, I checked my phone. There was a voicemail, time-stamped from the middle of the night. No number. I didn't play it until I was miles away. It was just breathing. Slow. Familiar. Then a voice. You still don't know where you went. That's the part that stays with you. I haven't taken back roads since. But sometimes, when I'm driving at night and the radio crackles without reason, I feel that same pressure in my chest. Like I'm about to miss a turn I won't be offered twice. I'm recording this because I don't know how else to explain what happened, and I don't want to forget any part of it. People always say time blurs details, but this is burned into my memory in a way that feels permanent. This happened in the western United States, in late October. I won't say the exact location because I still pass through that region for work, and honestly, I don't want anyone trying to check it out. Some places don't need visitors. I work contract maintenance for cellular relay stations, those isolated towers that sit miles away from towns, usually on government land or forgotten stretches of desert or forest. The kind of job where you drive hours without seeing another car, fix something, log it, and leave. That day, I was alone. The GPS lost signal about 40 minutes before I reached the site. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the silence. No radio chatter, no aircraft, no wind strong enough to move the scrub around me. Just my engine and the sound of tires on gravel. The tower was supposed to be near an old service road, but the marker on my map didn't match what I was seeing. The road narrowed until it looked more like a trail, two worn tracks cutting through dry land. I almost turned back, but my fuel was low, and the next town was over 60 miles away. That's when I saw the structure. It wasn't the tower. It was a building, low, concrete, windowless except for one narrow opening near the top. No markings, no signage, no road leading directly to it. Just sitting there like it had grown out of the ground. I parked about 50 yards away. I remember checking my phone. No signal. I told myself it was probably an old utility bunker or storage facility. The kind of thing you see out west and never question. I walked closer. That's when I noticed the door was open. Just a few inches. Enough to notice. Enough to make me stop. No footprints. No tire tracks. Just undisturbed dirt. I called out. Not loudly. Just a hello. That sounded small the moment it left my mouth. Nothing answered. The air smelled wrong. Not rotten. Not chemical. Just stale. Like a room that had been sealed for decades and opened suddenly. I should have walked away. Instead, I pushed the door. It opened smoothly, without resistance, like it had been oiled recently. Inside, it was colder than outside by at least 10 degrees. The walls were bare concrete, the floor clean, too clean. No dust, no debris, no signs of animals or people living there. There was a staircase going down. I didn't go far, maybe 10 steps. That's when I heard breathing. Not echoing, not distant. Right there. Slow. Controlled, like someone trying very hard not to be noticed. I froze. I said, "Hey, I'm leaving." The breathing stopped. Then a voice came from below me. Calm. Too calm. You already came in. That sentence still makes my stomach tighten. I asked who they were. The answer came immediately, like they'd rehearsed it. Someone who works here. There was no accent I could place. No emotion. Just flat certainty. I asked what this place was. They didn't answer. Instead, they said, "You shouldn't stand on the stairs." That's when I realized something I hadn't noticed before. The sound in the room, my breathing, my shifting weight, it wasn't echoing at all. The space was swallowing noise. I backed up slowly, never turning around. The voice followed me upward without footsteps. "Don't run. You'll trip." I reached the door and stepped outside, slamming it behind me. The door didn't close. It stopped halfway and slowly swung back open. I didn't look inside again. I got in my truck and drove. I didn't care about the tower. I didn't care about the job. I just drove until the road widened and the sky began to darken. That should have been the end. It wasn't. About 20 minutes later, my radio crackled to life. No station, no call sign, just breathing. The same slow, controlled breathing. Then the voice. "You missed a turn." I slammed the brakes. There was no one on the road. No vehicles. No structures. I turned the radio off. It turned itself back on. "You don't remember the way out," the voice said. "But I do." I drove faster. The road began looping. I recognized landmarks. Burnt trees, a split rock formation, passing again and again. My fuel gauge dropped faster than it should have. That's when I saw headlights behind me. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. I slowed, signaling for them to pass. They didn't. They stayed exactly the same distance behind me, no matter how fast or slow I went. When I pulled over, they pulled over. When I turned off my engine, their lights stayed on. I stepped out, waving my arms. "Hey, I need help." The lights shut off. There was no car, no engine heat, no tire marks, just empty road. My radio turned on again. "You're very far from where you think you are." I don't remember much after that clearly. I remember driving until my hands cramped. I remember seeing a sign for a town I knew didn't exist. I remember stopping at a gas station that had power, but no people. I locked myself inside the bathroom until sunrise. When morning came, my truck was parked outside a diner in a real town. One I recognized. One that should have been impossible to reach with the fuel I had. My tank was empty. I reported the incident to my supervisor. He went quiet when I described the building. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "There's no structure on that route." I insisted there was. He told me they'd sent survey teams before. GPS errors, yes. Abandoned towers, yes. But no buildings. I quit that job a week later. Here's why I'm recording this now. Last night, my phone rang at 2:14 a.m. No caller ID. I didn't answer. A voicemail appeared anyway. It was just breathing at first. Then the voice. "You found the exit once. That doesn't mean it stays open. I've checked my locks 3 times already. And somewhere in my house, very faint, barely noticeable, something is breathing in time with me."